If there were a place on Earth where you could stand at the cradle of humankind in the morning, drive through one of the planet's greatest geological wonders at noon, see a snow-covered mountain rising directly over the equator in the afternoon, and end the day listening to the waves of the Indian Ocean, would you believe that place actually exists? That is exactly what you will see in today's documentary. Kenya. Most people know Kenya through safari footage filled with lions, elephants, and giraffes. But if wildlife herds are all you remember about this country, then you have probably seen only a very small part of its story. Beneath the dry red soil of northern Kenya, scientists discovered some of the oldest known remains of human ancestors. Millions of years have passed since then. Yet Kenya still gives you the feeling that nature has never stopped writing the next chapter of that story. Imagine sitting in a vehicle and beginning a journey across this country. Kenya covers more than 580,000 square kilometers, nearly 1.5 times the size of California. That may sound enormous, but what makes this journey special is not the distance you travel, it is how quickly the scenery outside your window changes, making you feel as though you are crossing several different countries in a single day. The vehicle begins to move. On both sides of the road are stretches of dry land, where baobab trees and thorny bushes remain rooted beneath the intense heat of the semi-desert. A little farther ahead, the brown earth begins to give way to green grasslands. Within only a few dozen minutes, an entire savanna opens before you, so vast that the horizon seems to blend into the sky. Then, everything changes again. The road begins to descend. Ahead of you, the plains disappear, replaced by enormous cliffs that open up as though the earth itself has split into two halves. This is the Great Rift Valley. The Grand Canyon leaves millions of American visitors in awe with its massive gorge, but the Great Rift Valley is even more extraordinary because it is an entire geological system stretching across several African countries. Kenya lies directly within one of its most spectacular sections. Look to your right. Lakes rest quietly on the valley floor, reflecting the deep blue sky. At certain times of the year, the water appears to turn almost completely pink. It is not because of the sunlight, but because hundreds of thousands of flamingos have landed there at the same time. From above, the entire lake looks as though it has been covered by a constantly moving pink carpet. The vehicle continues forward, and the higher you climb, the cooler the air becomes. The open grasslands gradually give way to evergreen forests. Then come bamboo forests covering the mountain slopes. Suddenly, on the far edge of the horizon, a brilliant white peak appears. At first, it may not seem unusual until you remember that you are still right on the equator. That is Mount Kenya. Standing more than 5,199 meters high, it is the second highest mountain in Africa. What makes it famous is not only its height, but also the layers of ice and snow that remain throughout the year in the middle of the tropics. It feels almost like discovering a corner of the Alps in the heart of Africa. This rare contrast helped make Mount Kenya a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a symbol of the entire country. But the journey is not over. Continue driving east, and the air begins to grow warmer. The forests slowly disappear behind you, giving way to mangroves and long stretches of white sand along the Indian Ocean. In the distance are Mombasa and Lamu, port cities that have witnessed centuries of ships traveling between Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. It is hard to believe that in a single day, you can travel from a region considered the cradle of humankind, cross one of the world's most famous geological wonders, see a snow-covered mountain standing on the equator, and end your journey beside the ocean. But Kenya still has not shown you everything. From above, forests, grasslands, and semi-desert regions stretch one after another, all the way to the horizon. Scattered among them are small villages where people herd cattle, guide goats, work in the fields, or carry water home. In the drier regions, donkeys loaded with water containers and bags of goods slowly walk along dirt roads, while camel caravans are still used to transport tents and essential supplies. As the natural environment changes, human life adapts along with it. Every region of Kenya reveals a different ecosystem, to the point that wildlife does not exist only inside national parks. Sometimes, herds of zebras or groups of baboons can be seen calmly searching for food right beside the road. In the highland forests live elephants, rhinos, colobus monkeys, leopards, and lions. Across the savanna, herds of wildebeest, gazelles, impalas, and buffalo move in long lines toward the horizon. Following them are hyenas, cheetahs, and lions, maintaining a cycle of predator and prey that has continued here for tens of thousands of years. Kenya's lakes and rivers are also home to hippos, crocodiles, and countless species of freshwater fish. Lake Bogoria alone is famous for the hundreds of thousands of lesser flamingos that gather there, creating one of the largest bird concentrations in the world. Farther offshore lies the rich marine ecosystem of the Indian Ocean, filled with coral reefs and countless colorful creatures. Every year, as the seasonal rains shift, more than 1.5 million wildebeest, along with hundreds of thousands of zebras and Thompson's gazelles, begin their great migration between Tanzania's Serengeti Plains and Kenya's Maasai Mara National Reserve. From above, the herds form long black and gray ribbons, winding across the grasslands and covering the horizon. When they reach the Mara River, thousands charge into the muddy water at once, pushing against one another, slipping, falling, and struggling to swim to the opposite bank as the thunder of hooves echoes across the landscape. Beneath the surface, enormous Nile crocodiles wait in ambush. Along the riverbanks, lions, cheetahs, and hyenas watch for animals that have become exhausted or separated from the herd. Every river crossing is a brutal test of survival. Yet this journey has repeated itself for tens of thousands of years, creating one of the most spectacular natural wonders on Earth. For many travelers, safari is the main reason they come to Kenya. As the sun begins to rise, open-top vehicles slowly move across the savanna, weaving through bushes and scattered acacia woodlands. Every turn can reveal a completely different scene. A herd of elephants feeding peacefully, giraffes quietly reaching for leaves at the tops of trees, or a lion resting in the shade after a night of hunting. No one knows what will appear next, and that unpredictability is exactly what turns every safari into a true adventure in which humans are simply quiet guests observing the life of the natural world. And that is the journey we are about to explore together right now. But to understand Kenya more deeply, we need to travel back in time. Long before its famous national parks and modern cities existed, this land had already witnessed millions of years of human evolution, waves of migration, ships crossing the Indian Ocean, and the long search for identity of a young nation. To understand why Kenya has such a diverse culture today, perhaps we should begin with the great sea voyages across the Indian Ocean. Centuries ago, Arab, Persian, and Asian merchants followed the seasonal monsoon winds to reach the Kenyan coast. They brought goods, languages, religions, and new ideas. In return, they carried African products back across the ocean. Over many generations, these encounters gave rise to Swahili culture, coastal civilization, where architecture, language, faith, and local traditions blended into a distinct identity of their own. Even today, step into an old coastal neighborhood and you can still see history all around you. Along Kenya's shoreline, many Swahili houses have preserved their appearance for hundreds of years. Their walls were built from coral stone to keep the interiors cool in the tropical climate, while their intricately carved wooden doors not only displayed the wealth of the homeowners, but also preserved the artistic influence of Arab and Persian craftsmen. Walking through the streets of Lamu or Mombasa can feel like stepping into a trading port from centuries ago. The merchants brought more than goods. They also left behind language. Through generations of trade, local Bantu languages blended with Arabic and gradually developed into Swahili. Today, from coastal markets to schools and government offices, Swahili remains the language that connects tens of millions of Kenyans. As the sun rises over the Kenyan coast, fires begin burning in many Swahili kitchens. Women quickly grate coconuts, grind spices, clean the fresh fish brought ashore from dhow boats, and prepare fragrant dishes such as pilau, biryani, and richly spiced curries. Hundreds of years have passed, but the way they prepare a meal still carries traces of the ancient sea routes that once connected East Africa with the wider world. Here, every dish does more than feed a family. It also preserves the memory of an entire culture. Leaving the coast behind, each region becomes the homeland of communities with entirely different ways of life, customs, and story. Kenya is home to anywhere from 32 to more than 70 ethnic groups, speaking over 60 different languages. Even so, Swahili remains the language that connects people across the country, while English is also widely used everywhere. What makes Kenya special is not only the number of ethnic groups, but also the way each community has adapted to its own environment. And among them, the most famous are perhaps the Maasai and the Turkana. Let us visit a Maasai village. The moment you step through the thorn branch fence surrounding the village, an entirely different world opens up before you. Small houses made from branches, mud, and cow dung form a circle around the livestock, enclosure the heart of the entire village. Outside the homes, Maasai women wear bright red shukas, with layers of beaded necklaces covering their necks and shoulders, each bead carefully threaded by hand. For the Maasai, these are more than decorations. Every color and pattern carries its own meaning, and the way the jewelry is worn can reveal a person's age, marital status, or position within the community. In the center of the village courtyard, singing begins. Young Maasai men step into the circle one by one and perform the adumu, a dance known for the high, straight, vertical jumps that have become a symbol of their people. For the Maasai, adumu is not simply a performance for tourists. It was once part of ceremonies marking a young man's transition into adulthood, and it still appears at weddings, festivals, and occasions when the community welcomes special guests. Each jump displays not only an individual's strength, but also the unity of the group as the entire community sings and keeps rhythm behind him. Leaving the grasslands and traveling north through Kenya, the landscape changes completely once again. This is the homeland of the Turkana, one of the communities that has learned to survive in the extreme heat of northern Kenya. Dome-shaped shelters made from branches, animal hides, and woven palm leaf mats are scattered across the dry land. They are light enough for an entire family to take apart and load onto camels or donkeys whenever their livestock must move in search of new grazing areas and water sources. From early morning, the men carry herding staffs and almost always bring a small wooden stool object that rarely leaves their side, used for resting during long journeys or as a pillow when sleeping outdoors. Behind them, herds of goats, sheep, and camels move quietly in long lines across the semi-desert. In the village, the women stand out in brightly colored fabrics and layers of beaded necklaces covering their necks and shoulders. Their hands move quickly as they weave baskets, string beads, milk goats, and prepare meals made from ugali, camel milk, or fish caught in Lake Turkana. Children grow up alongside the livestock. From a very young age, they follow their parents to herd goats, carry water, or gather firewood. They learn to read animal tracks and remember where water can be found in a landscape that seems to contain nothing but rocks and sand. As the sun begins to set, the livestock return through clouds of red dust, and cooking smoke rises from the small shelters, bringing to a close another day in which every part of life revolves around animals, water, and the ability to adapt to nature. But adapting to nature is only half the story. The other half lies in the traditions that have long been woven into the lives of the people here. In Kenya, an ordinary day is not measured by the hours on a clock, but by how many times the kettle is placed on the stove. At sunrise, before heading to the fields or beginning the workday, people sit down with cups of hot tea brewed with milk, sugar, and sometimes ginger or cardamom. At midday, and then again in the late afternoon, the kettle returns to the stove. A neighbor stops by, a few friends pause for a visit, and conversations about family, crops, or work continue as steam rises from the cups. For Kenyans, Drinking tea has never been only about quenching thirst. It is a moment when the pace of the day slows down, giving people the chance to truly spend time together. Before the sun has even risen above the horizon, the red dirt roads are already filled with dust as herds of cattle, goats, sheep, and camels are driven toward the market. From a distance, you can hear the bells around the animals' necks, mixing with the calls of people shouting to one another. But the most fascinating part takes place during the negotiations. Instead of bargaining openly, many traders quietly hold hands and use their fingers to signal different prices inside their palms, covering their hands with a cloth so no one nearby can tell how the deal is progressing. Only when both sides nod and release their grip does the animal officially change hands. Around them, women sell milk, beadwork, and handmade crafts. Children run after wandering goats, while men sit beneath the shade of trees, discussing the rainy season, grazing land, and their livestock. In many parts of Kenya, the market is not simply a place to exchange goods. It is also where the entire community comes together after spending days scattered across vast stretches of grassland. Yet among the many communities that continue to preserve their ancient traditions, Kenya also has places that have written an entirely new story. Not far from the capital city of Nairobi lies a village where, if you walk from one end to the other, you will hardly see a single adult man. This is Umoja, Kenya's most famous women-only village. In 1990, after many Samburu women experienced violence and discrimination, a group of them decided to establish this village as a place where they could begin their lives again. They built their own homes, raised their children, tended livestock, grew crops, and created handmade beadwork to sell to visitors, providing income for the entire community. Boys are still raised in the village, but when they turn 18, they leave to begin lives of their own in accordance with the community's traditions. Today, Umoja is not only a home for women, but also a destination that attracts visitors from around the world. Many come not simply to see an unusual village, but to hear the stories of women who built a community of their own, a place where they can live, work, and decide their own futures. But Umoja is only one small part of the much larger picture of Kenya today. Leaving the village behind, we now travel to Nairobi place that most clearly reveals the two extremes existing side by side within the same country. Nairobi is the capital of Kenya and an important economic, cultural, and transportation hub in East Africa. It is a modern city, but it is also unique because a major wildlife reserve lies within the city limits. Nairobi National Park, where visitors can see rhinos, lions, and giraffes with skyscrapers rising in the background. Yet behind the modern buildings and famous safari destinations, Kenya still faces a wide gap between rich and poor. Nearly 1/3 of the population continues to live in poverty, and this reality is most visible in rural areas. Every morning, it is common to see women carrying containers on their heads as they walk for miles to collect water, farm dry plots of land, and depend almost entirely on seasonal rainfall. A single prolonged drought can destroy an entire harvest, weaken livestock, and threaten the livelihood of a whole family. Many villages still lack electricity, roads, schools, and healthcare facilities, making the struggle to earn a living or gain access to education an extremely difficult journey. If you want to understand Nairobi, try stepping onto a matatu. These minibuses are covered from top to bottom in graffiti, images of soccer players, rappers, or superheroes, while the interiors glow with LED lights and non-stop music. Each vehicle has its own personality, like a work of art rolling through the city. After only a few minutes on a matatu, you can feel the youthful, fast-paced, and energetic rhythm of life in Kenya. But while Nairobi is remembered for its matatus, life in rural Kenya moves at a completely different pace. Paved roads narrow into red dirt tracks, where mankokoteni handcarts loaded with sacks of corn, bundles of firewood, and yellow water containers slowly make their way toward the nearest market. Farther away, across the semi-desert, lines of donkeys and camels move beneath the sun, carrying tents, livestock feed, farm produce, and water containers freshly filled at a well. Some people guide herds of goats through thorny bushes. Others lean on wooden staffs as they drive cattle toward the last grazing grounds of the day. Barefoot children run alongside the animals, laughing and playing on roads covered in red dust. In places like this, transportation is not only about getting from one place to another. It carries water for an entire family, food for the days ahead, and sometimes even a whole home on the journey toward new land. Imagine a morning in Nairobi. The sun has not fully risen yet, but the market has been awake for a long time. A man leans forward as he pushes a cart piled high with bananas and sacks of corn through the crowded flow of people, the wheels grinding against the concrete. You have barely stepped aside to avoid a woman balancing a basket of fruit on her head when a young boy rushes past clutching a bundle of leafy greens. Just a few steps later, the smell of fresh vegetables quickly gives way to the scent of ginger, turmeric, cinnamon, and cloves, rising from sacks of spices stacked higher than a person's head. A little farther on, the whole walkway suddenly glows with colorful kitenge and kanga fabrics gently swaying in the breeze. A few more steps, and the sharp sound of hammers rings out from the craft section. Masks, spears, shields, bracelets, and strings of beads fill the stalls, each piece carrying the mark of the artisan's hands. If you arrive on the day of the Maasai market, the scene becomes many times more crowded. Maasai women in bright red shukas sit behind tarps spread across the ground, smiling as they lift beaded necklaces one by one to show visiting travelers. Every bead color and every pattern carries its own story, and behind each item are hours, sometimes even days, of careful work. Then suddenly, you stop in front of a strange stall. On the tray, instead of fruit or candy, are pale yellow pieces that look almost exactly like small lumps of earth. The seller breaks off a piece for a customer to taste, then smiles and explains that it is odoa. The main buyers are pregnant women. They believe that the smell of earth after rain, along with the taste of this clay, can help ease morning sickness. The strange thing is that something that seems as though it should remain buried underground is openly sold here like any other kind of food. But these lively markets are still only one small part of Kenya. Step outside the city, and a completely different world is waiting to be discovered. Maasai Mara National Reserve, the symbol of wild Kenya. When people think of Kenya, Maasai Mara is often the first image that comes to mind. It is one of the most famous wildlife reserves in the world, and the setting for the spectacular Great Migration, when millions of wildebeest and zebras move across the plains each year. It is also home to lions, elephants, leopards, buffalo, and rhinos. Amboseli National Park, where enormous elephant herds walk beneath the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro. Amboseli is famous for its huge herds of African elephants. Visitors can often see dozens of them moving slowly across dry grasslands and seasonal wetlands. With their wide ears, massive bodies, and long curved tusks, the elephants often cover themselves in red dust to protect their skin from the intense heat. Many elephant herds here still maintain their natural family structure, with the oldest female leading the group and protecting the calves. Together, these scenes create an unforgettable sight, as Africa's gentle giants appear against the distant backdrop of snow-covered Mount Kilimanjaro, Lamuth, ancient town where Kenya carries the spirit of Arabia. Far from the wilderness, Lamu introduces visitors to a completely different side of Kenya, a place where narrow streets, coral stone houses, and traditional dhow boats tell the story of centuries of trade across the Indian Ocean. Recognized by UNESCO as a World Heritage Site, Lamu is where African culture blends with influences from Arabia, India, and Persia. There are no dramatic hunts or enormous wildlife herds here. Instead, the town attracts visitors with its slow pace of life and the timeless beauty of a place that seems to have been forgotten by time. We have now traveled through nearly 2/3 of our journey across Kenya. But after coming this far, are you starting to feel hungry? If the answer is yes, then join me as we stop by a local restaurant to discover 3 flavors that have been part of Kenyan life for generations. The first dish you will find on almost every dining table is ugali. At first glance, it may look like nothing more than a simple mound of white cornmeal, but for Kenyans, ugali is the foundation of a meal. Cornmeal is continuously stirred into boiling water until it becomes thick, firm, and dough-like. To eat it, people use their right hand to break off a small piece, roll it into a ball, and press it into the shape of a tiny spoon for scooping up vegetables, sauce, or meat. If ugali is the foundation of the meal, then nyama choma is the dish that gets everyone excited to gather around the table. In Swahili, nyama choma simply means grilled meat. Goat is the most popular choice, though beef or lamb may also be used. The meat is slowly grilled over charcoal with very simple seasoning, sometimes with nothing more than a little salt to preserve its natural flavor. It is usually enjoyed with ugali, or a refreshing tomato and onion salad known as kachumbari. And no meal would be complete without a sip of Kenyan tea. Although Kenya is one of the world's largest exporters of black tea, Kenyans enjoy it in their own distinctive way. The tea leaves are boiled together with milk and sugar from the very beginning, creating an amber-brown drink with a rich aroma and a slightly creamy taste. After enjoying meals filled with local flavors, let us continue the journey by immersing ourselves in Kenya's festivals, where the heartbeat of its culture can be felt most clearly. Every year, the historic island of Lamu, located off the coast of the Indian Ocean, hosts the Lamu Cultural Festival. Its narrow streets, usually just wide enough for pedestrians and donkeys, suddenly come alive with the sounds of drums, Swahili music, and processions of people dressed in traditional clothing. Out at sea, dhow sailing boats race across the water, with their sails filled by the wind. On land, visitors can watch donkey races, Swahili poetry performances, henna painting, and reenactments of traditional wedding ceremonies in front of thousands of spectators. Leaving the coast and traveling north, you will arrive at the Lake Turkana Festival. Over several days, dozens of communities living around Lake Turkana gather together in brightly colored clothing and elaborate strands of colorful beads. They perform traditional dances, songs, and rituals that have been preserved for generations. For this reason, the festival not only attracts tourists, but is also regarded as a symbol of unity among the ethnic communities of northern Kenya. And if there is one event that shows how Kenya is preserving tradition while moving toward the future, it is the Maasai Olympics. The competitions include high jumping, spear throwing, club throwing, and long-distance running. The athletes still demonstrate their strength, endurance, and warrior spirit. But today, the reward is a medal instead of a lion, as it was in the past. Before we bring our journey through Kenya to a close, there are a few things you should know if you truly want to understand this land. Kenya is not simply a place where you arrive, take a few photos with a lion or a herd of elephants, and then leave. It is a country shaped by the meeting of wild nature, ancient cultures, and communities that have learned to adapt to some of the harshest environments in Africa. The best time to visit Kenya is generally between June and October, when the weather is dry, animals gather around water sources, and part of the Great Migration takes place in Maasai Mara. During this season, you may have the chance to witness millions of wildebeest and zebras crossing vast grasslands on a journey of survival that stretches for thousands of kilometers. However, Kenya's rainy season has a beauty of its own. The grasslands become greener, more birds appear, and the landscape takes on an entirely different character. It is a season for travelers who do not simply want to see Kenya, but want to experience the true rhythm of life in this country. When it comes to cost, Kenya offers many choices for different kinds of travelers. Independent trips can be more affordable, while private safari tours and stays at wilderness lodges can be far more expensive. But some experiences in Kenya cannot be measured in money, such as standing on the Maasai Mara plains as a lion walks past, or watching a herd of elephants move beneath the shadow of Mount Kilimanjaro in Amboseli. Never try to attract the attention of wild animals. Do not feed them, do not get too close, and never leave your vehicle without permission inside a safari area. No photograph is ever worth more than your safety or the peace of the animals that live here. When meeting indigenous communities, such as the Maasai or Samburu, remember that they are not part of a performance created for tourists. Do not photograph them without asking for permission. A greeting, a sincere question, or a brief conversation may help you understand them more deeply than any photograph ever could. Most importantly, respect this land. Do not leave trash behind, take nothing except memories. And never forget that the beautiful landscapes you see today must be protected so they can survive for future generations. Kenya may not be perfect. The country still faces challenges involving the environment, climate change, and the pressures of modern life. But the way its people continue to protect nature, preserve their cultures, and adapt to changing conditions is exactly what makes Kenya's story so remarkable. If Kenya has just earned a place on your travel list, leave the word asante in the comments. It means thank you in Swahili, a language spoken widely across Kenya. A simple word that reflects the warm hospitality of this East African country. If you enjoyed this journey through Kenya, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you can continue exploring with us as we uncover countries that still have so many untold stories. And where do you think we should travel next? Tanzania, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Madagascar, or somewhere else? Let us know in the comments. We will see you again on the next journey.